In our last lecture, we were talking about our life to the point where both Eva and I graduated from college and began our working career. On Monday, June 11th, 1963, both of us began working. Eva at Lakewood City Hospital. I was teaching my first classes at Youngstown University. It was a wonderful experience to be employed. It really made, I think, both of us feel adult. It showed that we were on our way to become independent individuals who could work out our own destiny and shape our lives according to the amount and intensity of work that we did. It is also, I think, interesting to note, and I realize that today we live in a different environment, that since the 11th of June 1963 to the end of May 2006, when I finally completely retired, I was always employed. There was never a day when I was an unemployed individual in the strictest sense of the word. Let us resume our story of the relationship between Eva and I. On June 15th, just a week after we started our work, our two families got together at the Oslani residence in Cleveland, and we had our formal engagement with a ring that has been passed for several generations, always to the oldest Domonkos boy to give to his bride. We were surrounded by our loving parents and our loving siblings. We wrote a note to our grandmothers. It was a grand and wonderful occasion. From this point on, obviously, there will be far fewer letters exchanged between Eva and myself, simply because of the fact that we now were less than 2 hours away from each other by car, and now I had a car. Furthermore, the long-distance telephone calls between Sharon, Pennsylvania and Cleveland, Ohio were far less expensive than to South Bend, from South Bend to Cleveland, or from South Bend to Sharon. We both took to our jobs very quickly and immersed ourselves into them, and loved doing what we were supposed to do. During the course of the summer, Eva went down to Columbus on a weekend and took her state board exams for the Ohio Licensing Board to be a registered nurse. Also during this period, I began teaching Eva how to drive on my little black Studebaker, which I had received from my dear friend Dr. Gabriel. Eva was an extremely competent student. She did very well, and at the appropriate time I always rewarded her with warm kisses, which I think gave her extra incentive to try harder. She also remarked that she much preferred me teaching her the skills of driving while we were engaged and not married, because as engaged couples, she felt that I would treat her more kindly if she made a mistake than if we were already man and wife and took each other, I guess, for granted. We also had to find a place where we would be holding our nuptial mass, the wedding that we were planning. Ava's parents had joined a church in Lakewood, Ohio, and had been dues-paying members there. Absolutely beautiful church. We then made an appointment with the Monsignor, who was the parish priest, in order to make sure that everything was filled out, all the official papers, and that everything was in readiness, because after all, I was going to be leaving for Europe, and when I came back, that was not the time to run around looking for a parish to have our wedding performed. Unfortunately, the Monsignor Gallagher, became immensely irritated when I brought up the problem of having my former professor, who was obviously a priest, and who wanted to perform the ceremony. I wanted him to come and be allowed to do so. The Monsignor became very irritated, and he said in his church only he performs the marriage. I then made, I guess, the mistake of pointing out that according to church law, he could not deny a priest the right to say a nuptial mass if that particular priest had written permission from the diocesan bishop, which Professor Gabriel was going to get. When I pointed that out to the Monsignor, he became extremely irate, and he said, "You people think that you can run things. Well, in my church, I run things the way I want." Whereupon I responded, "Well, Monsignor, thank you for your Christian charity." Whereupon he began shouting, and Ava and I exited the parish, and Monsignor Gallagher was at the parish door shaking his fist after us. This was a rather painful and unfortunate incident. We then, shaken by the event, went to another nearby Catholic parish called St. Luke's, actually closer to the Oslani residence than St. James. And we went and talked to the young priest who was there, explained to them what had happened, complained that here we were, two young men. Eva graduated from St. John's College, a Catholic institution. I was about to receive a PhD from Notre Dame after getting 2 graduate degrees there already, and this is the way the church was treating us. The young priest was very apologetic. He said, "Unfortunately, the old Monsignor is behaving weirdly. I guess he was becoming senile, and they will have absolutely no problem accommodating Ava and me," and they took our names and the required documents, and January the 4th was reserved for us to be able to use the church to be married, and they had absolutely no objection to us using Professor Gabriel as the priest who would marry us. My teaching experience at Youngstown University came to an end. It was a most enjoyable period. I really loved my students, and considering that this was my first teaching, I think I did rather well from the comments that the students wrote after the class was over. I had to prepare now to depart for Europe, and packed my bags and sent a overseas large case with my winter clothes and a tape recorder, large tape recorder. In those days you had wheel-to-wheel tape recorder, so I would have music in my new place in Vienna, send those off to Europe, and then according to a marvelous plan devised by Eva already back in April, we went to New York. That is, Eva and I, my brother Istvan, and my sister Judith. The four of us drove to Cleveland, from Youngstown to New York, stayed with my sister's then boyfriend, eventually husband, Vicky, and his father. They were very hospitable and sweet, and we spent a pleasant weekend before my departure. Saying goodbye to my sweetheart was a very difficult thing, and especially when I saw how devastated she was, and she cried, although she had tried to be brave, it broke my heart. Obviously, it would have been much more wonderful if the two of us could have gotten married before our departure, could have left as man and wife for Vienna on September the 2nd, but our financial circumstances obviously prevented that from being realistic. I sent a dozen roses through my brother to Eva once she got home, to be delivered to her on September 4th, which was her birthday. On September 2nd, I embarked on the ship of the American export line called SS Constitution, and set out for Genoa, Italy. The boat was a beautiful, rather modern ship. I immediately saw the immense difference between transportation on a U.S. troop carrier, such as the General Sturgis had been, and going on a luxury liner. The Fulbright Commission had rented space on the ship for all of us Fulbrighters going to Vienna. There were about 20 to 25 of us. Four of us single men were put in a single cabin in the bowels of the ship, but we really didn't care much because we were on board the deck most of the day anyway, so that was not an issue. Already on the boat, I met a wonderful fellow medievalist by the name of Zoltan Kostolnik, graduate student from NYU, who was a few years older than I was also of Hungarian descent, so we immediately made contact and became, through the years, very dear friends. The ship took the southern route, that is, after leaving New York Harbor, we headed southeast. Our first stop after several days out on the open ocean was the lovely island of Madeira, a beautiful tropical isle filled with flowers and beautiful villas. From there, we went to the North African port of Casablanca, a marvelous town. The difference between the Kasbah, which was the native quarter, which gave the impression that you stepped back at least 1,000 years, and the ultra-modern section of the town, which was basically French-built, the contrast was startling. We stopped on Gibraltar, the rock, saw the fortifications, saw the famous monkeys there. From there, we sailed again into the Mediterranean to Barcelona. From there, some Fulbright friends and I took a side trip to the beautiful medieval monastery of Montserrat. Then returned to ship and continued our voyage to the famous Riviera city of Cannes, famous for its film festivals, and finally anchored in Genoa, Italy, which was the final destination of our voyage. There we were met by the head of the Austrian Commission in charge of the Fulbright program, Dr. Porhansel. He had made reservation for us on a first-class sleeper, which then took us from Genoa via Milan, Venice, overnight to Vienna. And next morning when I woke up, we were about 30 miles from Vienna, approaching the end destination and waiting to get off the train to be in the town where I would be spending roughly the next 10 months. The first 2 weeks in Vienna were taken by orientation program, a very thorough orientation program. This took the form of city tours, tours into the countryside, receptions at the American Embassy, reception at the Austrian Ministry of Culture, lectures by Austrian professors about the background of Austria and its history. A very interesting trip to Lower Austria, which also included a stop very close to the Austrian-Hungarian border, where you could really and truly see the Iron Curtain as it existed in 1963. Watchtowers within sight of each other, barbed wire, minefields, and with the very idea that 10 million people were held in a huge concentration camp was a very, very sad sight for me to see. My very first task upon arrival in Vienna was to find accommodations not only for myself, that basically was what most of my Fulbright friends did, they found accommodations for themselves, but I had to find accommodations that would be for a married couple, and accommodations which were of a level that I felt comfortable with. And although my dear Eva had written to me saying that she would even live in a hovel if necessary, just so that we could be together after marriage, I felt that maybe a hovel was not a good solution, and I did find a relatively modern efficiency apartment, which I then proceeded to rent. It had some shortcomings, although the building where it was housed was built in 1957. It did not have central heating. Each little apartment in the building had its own separate stove. In this case, a little iron stove, which in the winter we did use, but then also quickly caught on and supplemented the heating with a portable electric heater, which kept us nice and cozy. Besides, there was a pet shop underneath, which, in order to keep the exotic pets warm, especially in the winter, had to be well heated. So the floor of the apartment was always very nice and comfortable. A few words about my life while in Vienna. Obviously, the major aim of my stay in that town was to find information, do research on my doctoral dissertation. The requirement of the Fulbright program was that all Fulbrighters had to be enrolled at the university, which then eventually I did in early October when the academic year began, and I was able to be accommodated in a seminar held by a very, very famous Austrian professor by the name of Heinrich Fichtenau, and so for the first semester I attended that. I also took another course in social economic history of medieval Europe, taught by a gentleman who was not very famous, nor was the course very good. At this point, let me for a moment stop and make some quick comparisons. I found that the education I received at the University of Notre Dame, particularly at the Medieval Institute, was far superior than what I saw in Vienna. The hands-on experience, the intense preparation for scholarly life that I was subjected to use a word maybe which is a little too strong, I felt was far superior than the sort of lackadaisical way that Professor Fichtenau, for example, ran his seminar with each student giving his paper. There was not much criticism, there was not much comment, and about all that the world-famous professor said was, now we're going to have a paper read by Miss Schneiderhan. Please, Miss Schneiderhan, would you come up and present your paper? When she was finished reading her paper, Professor Fichtenau said, well, thank you very much, Miss Schneiderhan. Now we will have another paper, and this is how it went week after week. Fortunately, it was only once a week. A far better experience by leaps and bounds was my experience at the university archives. And this is really why I came. The archives of the University of Vienna contained material about students from all parts of Europe who came to that famous university in the 14th and 15th century. I was primarily interested in 15th century. And there were a large number of Hungarian students. I was trying to show how a university that had recently been established in Hungary had both faculty members and students who interacted with the University of Vienna. Some had received training in the Hungarian university, came to continue their studies in Vienna. There were exchange of professors, and all of this could be revealed from the records of the university, which go back to its foundation in 1365. Fortunately for me, the director of the university archive was a good friend of my mentor, Professor Gabriel, and when I went and introduced myself, he already knew who I was and why I was coming. He welcomed me with a great deal of kindness, showed me what they had, and made every effort to be of help to me. This became particularly important during the second semester of my stay in Vienna, when the university archives were officially closed down for almost a half a year because the university was getting ready for the celebration of the 600th anniversary of its foundation. And in order to duly celebrate that great event, the University of Vienna decided to install central heating in this 19th century building, which meant that they had to drill through ceilings and walls, which were often 3-4 feet wide or deep. There was mortar flying all over the damn place. Most of the materials were put away or covered with tarp, but knowing that my time in Vienna was limited, Professor Gall, who maintained his office in the archive even while it was closed, gave me a special key. I could come and go as I wished, and there, sometimes with no heat, with a blanket over myself to keep myself warm and keep the dust that was flying around from covering my suit, I did my research under somewhat austere conditions, but nevertheless, it was wonderful that this arrangement could be worked out for me. I also did research in the Austrian National Library. It was wonderful to live in Vienna. It is a very pleasant town. I also found, as the weeks passed, that my apartment was most suitable. I could get down to downtown in a matter of a few minutes. The public transportation was superb and very inexpensive. There were frequent letters that I wrote to Eva. There were letters that came from her to me, and although she was working extremely hard, about which I will talk in a moment, she did manage to write to me quite regularly. While I was in Vienna, she visited my parents in Sharon in September. The Oslani parents and Eva went to visit my folks in October. Unfortunately, however, time came when news from home became very distressing. Both Eva and my mother wrote that my father's health had deteriorated greatly. He had congestive heart failure, and the end was apparently near. But before touching on that event, let me briefly also mention that I was deeply saddened by the assassination of President Kennedy in November, and the Austrians were very sympathetic to the American people in this time of great sadness. There was a special commemorative service held at the Burgtheater, that is the largest theater in Vienna, with the Vienna Philharmonic playing Beethoven's Third Symphony, particularly the slow movement called the funeral movement. One Saturday evening in early December, probably 7th, 8th, 9th, I'm not sure anymore, I came home from visiting some friends, an Austrian couple, when I found a telegram in my mailbox indicating that my father had died. I was absolutely devastated. Dad and I were very close to each other. He was a man of exceptional talent, and he and I got along very well, especially the last 10 years of his life. Next day, Sunday, I immediately notified the director of the Fulbright Committee in Austria that I had to return home. Monday, with his help, went to the American Express, bought plane tickets for Tuesday to fly home, quickly gathered up my things, left Vienna, flew to Amsterdam, and from there to New York. May I point out that this was the very first time that I had flown. I've never been on an airplane before. It was a very interesting experience, although I was obviously greatly saddened. It was also unusual in a sense that after we took off from Amsterdam around 5 o'clock, the setting sun, we were following, and for about almost an hour, the plane and the setting sun were going at the same speed until finally the sun disappeared, and I landed in early evening in Cleveland, in New York, and then had to take the flight to Cleveland. Now, in all of my 74 years, there were only 2 instances where I thought that I would die. That evening, the flight from New York to Cleveland was one of those events. We were in a horrible blizzard. The plane, which was a rather small one, was thrown up and down and sideways and creaked and made horrendous noises. The stewardesses obviously were scared as well because they were as white as sheets. And I was almost certain that we would crash, and that instead of having one funeral next day, there might be 2 funerals in the days to come. Somehow the pilot did make it to Cleveland. We landed in a snowstorm, and the only ray of sunshine on that terrible, sad day was when I came out of the terminal. There was Eva waiting for me, along with my dearest brother, István. István had borrowed a 4-wheel vehicle, possibly even with chains, and he had driven up with Eva from Sharon to pick me up on this horrendously bad night. It took us quite a while to get home, so it was very close to 1 o'clock a.m. by the time we reached Sharon, and I was able to hug my poor mother and my sister. We then fell into bed, exhausted, all of us. Next morning we had to be at the funeral home by 9:30, so it was a short and restless night. It was still snowing. Arrived at the funeral home. My father's casket was there. I know that he was buried in his uniform as a major of the Royal Hungarian Army, but I never looked into the casket. I never saw him dead. And I attributed the fact that for years until now, I very often have dreams in which he is completely part of our life, met with my children and even grandchildren. Because I never saw him dead, I think this plays a role in these very vivid dreams. It's a strange coincidence that the church from which my dad was buried is the very same church which had sponsored us 12 years previously. The priest who officiated at the funeral mass, Father Ban Vites, was also the priest who subsequently married my sister, subsequently married my brother in Youngstown because he was transferred there, and subsequently baptized our youngest son, Andrew. On this very sad day, Eva was beside me as if she had already been my wife, and I am always grateful for my family for having allowed her to become a part of our very special, closely bound family even before we were formally married. The trip to the cemetery was treacherous. It was still snowing. Subsequently, out-of-town guests came, and we had a little reception at our house. I do remember the very kind words of my then almost father-in-law, Ava's dad, who came up to me when people were leaving and said, "I know I will never replace your dad, but I am always there for you whenever you need me." I always remember that with a great deal of kindness. When everybody left, all of us were extremely tired. It was late afternoon, and I remember going upstairs and sitting down on a bed in my sister's bedroom, and Ava was sitting there too, and so was my sister Judy, and we just sort of cuddled with Ava on the bed, and subsequently, I guess, totally exhausted, I fell asleep. So that was my first sleeping with Ava. Let me also point out that in the days when Ava and I were dating, sleeping together before you were married was not as common as it is today, and this was only a symbolic sleeping together, and we did not sleep together until we were married. Next few days were difficult, not only because of the very sad occasion that brought me home, but we had to work out a number of problems. What should we do as far as the wedding is concerned? The burial of my father and the wedding that we were already preparing were a little more than 3 weeks apart. I made it very clear that I would not go back to Vienna without Ava. My mother very sensibly said, "Look, the life is for the living, and Dad would have wanted you to get married." Yet we felt that the wedding is a joyous occasion, And so we had to make certain compromises. There was to be no festive luncheon. The bridal attendants, and there were 4 beside the maid of honor, we did without. Everything was to be low-key, and my dear sister was maid of honor. My brother-in-law, Tony, Eva's brother, was best man. Unfortunately, there was no formal role for my dearest brother, who would have been part of the wedding party had there been bridesmaids to escort. I always regretted that. Soon Eva returned to Cleveland to make changes in the arrangements that had already been made to adjust to the new conditions. She spent her last Christmas with her family, terminated her employment at Lakewood City Hospital, and was getting ready for January the 4th. A few words about Eva's life from the time that I left her on September 2nd to go off to Europe. Separation was an extremely difficult time for us. During the summer, we had seen each other often, had become so accustomed to the fact that I could run up to Cleveland and see her anytime. She often came to visit us in Sharon. We went to concerts, to parties together. It was great to be so close to each other instead of separated by a distance of 5.5 hours of driving. Eva was depressed. She even lost weight. She admitted in her letters that when alone in her bedroom, she often cried herself to sleep. However, she had to go on, and being a strong individual that she was, and knowing that she had to be able to function well in her new job, she then tried to put her life back together. One major incentive was when she passed her driving exams with 100% results. By the way, I had left the little Studebaker card that I had gotten from Dr. Gabriel. I left the car with Eva so that she could have transportation while going back and forth to work or coming to visit my family in Sharon. She did enjoy her duties as an orthopedic nurse, although at first she had some questions whether that's an area of medical care that she would be interested, but she began to love it. Apparently was also loved by her patients, respected by her co-workers, and before long she even got a substantial raise in salary, which was unexpected. She also had many other things to do, namely find a place for us to have a reception after our wedding. She and her mother went and picked out a wedding dress. Together with my sister, they planned dresses for the attendants or the bridesmaids, and she also had to get a large trunk ready to send her clothes. Remember that she had to pack her clothes for winter, spring, and summer, and both for formal events like going to the opera or to balls, and also leisure wear. So obviously she was very busy. To earn as much money as possible for our European stay, and especially for travels, she often worked 6 days a week, and there were even times when she accepted double shifts where she would work from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. Obviously, these times were not easy for her, but again, she took them on because she felt that with each dollar that she could save, this would enable us to travel and to live more comfortably during the time that we were in Europe. When Dad became ill, she made trips not only to Sharon, but when Dad was transported by ambulance to Youngstown, she went to visit him at the hospital, called up Dr. Holmes, our family friend, and talked to him concerning Dad's condition so that she could then write and explain to me exactly what the situation with my father was. And at that point, at least, there was hope that he would be eventually released from the hospital and somehow would be strong enough to be able to attend our wedding. Upon my return from Vienna, during those terribly difficult times, Eva was always a rock, a source of comfort and of loving attention. She was undoubtedly disappointed, although she never expressed this and never even hinted at it. But she had prepared for our wedding with so much enthusiasm and so much care that when things had to be scrubbed and when things changed and the whole wedding had to be made simpler and adjusted to the changed situation, she made this adjustment and she made it gracefully, and again, as I said, without ever saying a word. Before our wedding on January the 4th, there were a few matters that had to be attended to. Both of us spent Christmas with our family. This was the last Christmas Eva spent with hers. This was the first Christmas that I spent without Dad around. Between Christmas and New Year's, I had to leave to go to Philadelphia to the American Historical Association convention, which was the place where one sought employment for the following year. I had a number of interviews, among them with University of Southern California, Ithaca College, Lehigh University, but my best interview was with the University of Vermont, and they showed a great deal of interest in hiring me, and so I felt quite confident that there would be an offer made, and in fact an offer was made. Meanwhile, Eva was back in Cleveland putting final touches on the altered wedding plans. We also, in the last minute, had to scurry around to find a priest because Dr. Gabriel could not come to do the wedding ceremony because he was delayed by some unforeseen events at Harvard, where he was teaching that year. We did, however, before the wedding, have a quiet, sort of a bittersweet New Year's in Sharon. Mom, my brother and sister, my sister's boyfriend, Vicky, and Eva spent the evening quietly together. And then Eva went back to Cleveland. A few words about our wedding day before I close this phase of my presentation. My sister stayed at Eva's house because in the morning they went to get their hair done. You always have that on a wedding day. My mother, brother, and I stayed with my dad's best friend in one of the Cleveland suburbs. Early in the morning, the telephone rang. It was Tony calling, asking, "Are you still there?" I reassured him that I had not absconded during the night and that, in fact, I will be there at the church in a very brief time. I must have been somewhat disconcerted and nervous that morning because I do remember putting Brill cream, which is a hair tonic, on my toothbrush and starting to brush my teeth in that fashion, which was not a pleasant experience. It was a cold, snowy day in Cleveland. The roads were covered with snow and were in poor condition. We arrived at St. Luke's Church, and Tony and I waited at the altar as Eva came in on the arm of her father. She was absolutely beautiful. I was struck by the beauty of her face, the elegance of her movements, the loveliness of her dress. There was no person happier that day than I was seeing her come to take our vows. When we arrived at the church, it was quite distressing because there were not that many people. By the time the wedding ceremony was over and the Mass had concluded, and Eva and I stood up and faced the congregation, the church had filled up very nicely, and we marched out smiling happily and welcoming our friends. The Oslani parents had a nice reception during the course of the afternoon at their house, sort of an open house. People came and went, and it was a leisurely, lovely day. Unlike so many people who don't remember their wedding day because it was sort of a whirlwind for them, we had the opportunity to really and truly savor it. The afternoon we opened the gifts. Many of them were absolutely lovely pieces. And here may I add that when the question came up, both on the part of the Oslani parents and my mother, friends of theirs and friends of ours asked, well, what should we buy for the newlyweds? Much to everybody's consternation and surprise, I said, tell them to buy us pretty things, decorative items. And they were wondering why two people who had nothing would ask for decorative items, to which my response was simply that the things that we will need to start a household, we will buy anyway. in all probability, for a number of years, we will not have much money, and therefore would not be able to afford pretty things and nice decorative items. And if we got him as a wedding gift, that would be always something that we would remember with a great deal of affection for the people who gave us those lovely items. As the afternoon wore off, there was the traditional throwing of the wedding bouquet, and then came an incident which to me was somewhat unusual. At that point, I had not attended too many American weddings yet, apparently, and I was not familiar with the thing about removing the garter from the leg of the bride. And so, just before going upstairs to change, Ava then looked at me in a fetching way. She put one of her legs up on a coffee table and began pulling up her skirt and looked at me and said, "Come and get it." And I was mystified as to what that meant, and I responded, "What? Now and here?" And this naturally created considerable amount of hilarity. She then very quickly explained what she meant. I removed the garter. We went and changed into traveling clothes, had dinner. The photographer who had taken pictures of the wedding came. Fortunately, already had pictures ready to deliver. My father-in-law bought the whole lot. So even as we were getting ready to leave on our honeymoon, we already had our wedding pictures along. After dinner, we headed for the Cleveland airport, and tearful goodbye to our friends and family. Went into the plane, sat down very quietly, said to ourselves, finally alone, at which point one of Eva's friends, who was a former stewardess and was able to pull this off, came into the cabin with a large bottle of champagne and with a ribbon on it, and yelled out, "Happy wedding to you and happy honeymoon," and she ran up to us and gave us this bottle of champagne. We then took off, went to New York. A shuttle bus went to the Airport Intercontinental Hotel, where we had reservations for Saturday and Sunday night. Went to our room, began unpacking, felt like having a snack, and I called up room service and said I would like to order a Caesar salad, a bucket of ice, and 2 champagne glasses. The person at the other end said, "No champagne." I said, "No, thank you, no champagne." He said, "We will deliver soon." As Ava was fidgeting with her purse to get the key to our suitcase, she inadvertently knocked over the bottle of champagne that was sitting on the dresser. The bottle of champagne fell, broke into 1,000 pieces. The champagne soaked into the carpet immediately. There were pieces of glass all over the place, and the room began smelling like a bar. Shortly thereafter, after picking up pieces of glass so we don't get cut, I called again and said, "Remember, the people who ordered Caesar salad, a bucket of ice, and 2 glasses. Well, could you now also bring a bottle of champagne?" We took this to be a positive thing. Uh, there is a German expression, Scherben bringen Glück, meaning glass shards bring luck. And so with that idea, we then began our married life together. And in my next little spiel, I will tell about our voyage to Europe, our arrival in Vienna, and our life there for the next 6 months. Last time we were talking in the previous episode of the Domonkos saga, Eva and I had gotten married and had arrived in New York City, where we spent Saturday and Sunday at the airport Intercontinental Hotel. It was a very cold, drizzly 2 days, so we didn't even venture out to Manhattan as we had originally planned. On Monday afternoon, we made our way to the international terminal at JFK Airport, which in those days was called Idlewild, and we made our way to the Icelandic Airlines office, boarded a plane in the late afternoon, a so-called 4-engine turboprop, and took off for Europe. The plane landed in Newfoundland and Canada and Gander to refuel. To remember, in those days the flights had to refuel more often. From there, through the polar route, we flew to Reykjavik, Iceland. We got off the plane there and were given a wonderful breakfast, then reboarded the plane and flew another 8 hours, arriving around 5 o'clock in the afternoon at the airport in Luxembourg. We took a bus provided by the airline to Frankfurt, and right across from the main railroad station there was a lovely hotel called the Hotel Metropole, where we went and registered. We were dead tired, having sat in a plane almost 19 hours by the time we landed in Europe, and so getting horizontal was a wonderful feeling. Next morning after breakfast, the hotel porter helped us with our baggage across the street to the railroad station. At 11 o'clock we boarded a train which headed an express to Vienna, and had a very pleasant journey. The countryside was beautifully snow-covered. At early afternoon we went into the dining car and had a late lunch, and by evening at 9 o'clock we arrived in Vienna, where we took a taxi, and at 9:25 I carried Eva across the threshold of our new home, and she was enchanted with the apartment that I had rented. It was not a hovel, and our very dear Fulbright friends in the meanwhile had brought some food and wine and beer, and set wood ready to light the fire. So everything was in readiness for our arrival. It was a very sweet and wonderful thing for them to do this. We changed into comfortable clothing, and then we had what I call the presentation of the gifts, because in previous September on my way to Europe, at every port where I stopped, I picked up a little present for Eva, which then I presented to her. She just thought that was a great idea, and it was wonderful. We were obviously very, very happy in this new surrounding and knew that we would be living there for the next 6 months. 2 days after our arrival, both of us got very ill. I guess we picked up something on the plane, which is not uncommon. And so Ava's nursing skills were immediately tested. As soon as we were able to get out and about, we went to register at the local police station, which, by the way, in those days, everywhere in Europe, within 48 hours of arrival into a city, you had to go to the local police station and register. Obviously, more than 48 hours had passed, and the bureaucratic lady at the desk was very perturbed, asking, where were you? You arrived according to your passport several days ago. Whereupon, with a completely straight face, I said, well, I was home in bed with my wife. And she looked up very startled, and I said, both of us have been very ill, which then she said, well, then it's okay. Then I tried to explain to her that in the United States you can travel wherever you want to and you don't have to show your passport or register with the police, but she didn't see the humor in that one. Anyway, the problems facing poor Eva as a housewife in Vienna can be summarized as follows. In those days, there were very few supermarkets, if there were any. They were either downtown or in the suburbs. In the neighborhood where we lived, there were small shops. No self-service. You had to go in and you had to ask for every item that you wanted to purchase. Furthermore, there were specialty stores for coffee, tea, and chocolates. There were specialty stores where only meat products were sold. There were special stores where only vegetables were sold. So I had to take Eva around the neighborhood and show her how one has to go from place to place, pick up the items that you wanted in small quantities. Besides, we had no refrigerator, and so that created somewhat of a problem, especially since Eva did not have very good German language skills, especially when we arrived. But remarkably, she caught on very quickly, became sort of a institution in the neighborhood, was referred to as the little Hungarian woman from America, and everybody thought that she was very, very charming. Our life was harmonious and carefree. It is remarkable how very fast we became acquainted with each other, that is, accustomed to living with each other. There was no problem of adjustment as such, and it seemed to be perfectly natural for the two of us to be together. I must say that I had great admiration for Eva, because after all, not only did she leave her parents, as all women do when they get married, but I did, in essence, drag her off to halfway across the world to a country where she did not have very good command of the language, into a culture that was in many ways different from what she was accustomed to. Yet again, she made very quick adjustments in these matters as well. Now, there were also things that developed which were very positive. we did have a leisurely life. It is true that I had to attend lectures at the university, but very few. It is true that I went regularly to the university archives and to the National Library, but I went at my pace and at whenever time that I wanted to go. And what was so wonderful is that Eva, who since the time that she was 16 was always working, earning money to put herself through school, as I mentioned, she had to earn her way through school because her parents did not approve of the nursing degree that she was trying to earn. For the very first time, now that we were married, Eva did not have to go anywhere. She could be, in a way, a woman of leisure, and she enjoyed that immensely. Very often, at rather odd hours, we would come and go. We would read to each other. For example, this time when we read Hawaii, very, very long novel by Michener, to each other, often in the middle of the night. Then we would have a snack, and we would read to each other so that each one of us would be able to preserve their voice. We also had an active social life. Every Sunday there was a beautiful musical mass in one of the churches that we would attend. Many of our Fulbright friends were there, whether they were Catholics or Jewish or Protestant. They all came because it was a musical experience, after which we usually gathered at a nearby restaurant. During the week on Wednesday, very often we would go to the Kunsthistorische Museum, which is the Museum of Fine Arts in Vienna, because on certain evenings of the week, entry was free. So we would have dinner, or we would go out and have dinner, then go to the museum, spend a few hours there, and enjoy, again, the closeness and the love that existed between us. We also were able to go to a few concerts and opera and operetta, but then our chance to attend musical events was greatly accelerated as a result of an event which I will quickly summarize. The Vienna Symphony, this is not the Vienna Philharmonic, which is the more famous orchestra, but the Vienna Symphony is a very good orchestra as well. The Vienna Symphony was on a concert tour in the United States, and among the cities where they concertized was the city of Cleveland. And there, because my father-in-law was on the German faculty at Cleveland State University, he was made part of the welcoming committee of the Vienna Symphony. And there was a banquet held in the honor of the symphony with the mayor of Cleveland present, with my father-in-law being chair of one of the committees, and my mother-in-law also present. And one of the benefactor ladies after the dinner came over and asked my father-in-law, how do I make out the check that I want to donate money to the cause here? Do I write Vienna Philharmonic? Whereupon one of the members of the orchestra stepped up and said, no, lady, we are the Vienna Symphony. And he took out a card with his name on it and said Wiener Symphoniker, the Vienna Symphony, and left it on the table. My father-in-law looked at the card and looked at the address, and it was exactly the same address where Eva and I were living. So he talked to the gentleman who left the card and said, I am familiar with that house. And the gentleman said, oh, when were you last in Vienna? So my father-in-law replied, something like 20 years ago. Whereupon this Austrian musician replied, well then, you cannot know where I live because the house that is the address on my card, the house was built in 1957. And my father-in-law said, yes, I know that. It is a 6-story high building, and on the bottom floor there is a pet shop right before the main entrance. And the man looked at Robert and said, how could you know this? Whereupon he replied, well, because my daughter and son-in-law live right above the pet shop in your building. So he said, oh, this is incredible. What an absolute coincidence, which obviously it is. And so he said, we are going to be concertizing for another 3 weeks, but tomorrow I will be writing to my wife, and I will tell her to get in touch with your daughter and her husband, and when I get back, if the young people, meaning us, are interested in music, we will provide them with concert tickets. And sure enough, a few days later, there was a knock at the door, and this lady and a 9-year-old little girl came down saying that who they were, and they had come to greet us. This 9-year-old little girl came in very handy because while I was off at the library or the archives, she would often come to keep Eva company, and did a great deal in teaching her some of the basic forms of German conversation. Once Mr. Wegrich, that was his name, Herbert Wegrich, came back, not only were we given tickets to various concerts of the Vienna Symphony, but very often they gave us a ride to the Symphony Hall, and then subsequently when many of the musicians then went out to a restaurant to have a little snack after the concert, they took us along as well. So we got to meet members of the orchestra, we got to meet the conductor, and we would never have been able to afford as many concerts as we went to had it not been this unusual meeting, again showing how incredibly small the world is. January and February in Vienna were dark and somber and gray. We hardly ever saw the sun. In March things began to improve, and obviously it was more pleasant to go out, and we then visited Schönbrunn Palace, where the Habsburg kings used to reside. Also in March, my dear Eva organized a wonderful surprise birthday party for me. I had absolutely no inkling. I guess behind my back she asked a number of our dear Fulbright friends to come and come celebrate my birthday. And when I came home from the university, as I usually did, I was met by Eva in the hallway, and when I came into our living room, people jumped out from behind furniture and from the little kitchen and sang happy birthday, and Eva made some wonderful dishes. By the way, although she had concerns about how she will do as a cook, except for one or two missteps, such as putting cayenne pepper in soup instead of paprika, she did absolutely marvelously, and people who came to visit loved everything that she put on the table. Not only did I have Fulbright friends, but we also had some Austrian friends and also some very distant relatives of my mother who lived in town, and it is there that we for the very first time met a couple who will play a role in our lives later on as well, and these are my cousin Attila Valko and his actress wife Emese Balog. They had come to Vienna to visit these relatives. These relatives invited us, and so that we met them for the very first time there. Now, while all this is going on, we also corresponded with both of our grandmothers, and the question was, how could we meet with them? After all, both of them lived in Budapest, Vienna, and Budapest is, basically a skip and a hop away from each other. At first, we were reluctant to go back behind the Iron Curtain, fearful of our safety, and were hoping to bring the grandmothers to Vienna. But this presented a real problem. Both of them were elderly. My grandmother was 79, Eva's 80. My grandmother lived with her sister, who was about 4 years younger, and my wife's grandmother lived with an aunt, Irenke. But to bring them to Vienna would have been complicated. I mean, elderly people have difficulty in traveling, getting on trains on and off. Then the apartment we had was so small that it barely accommodated the two of us, let alone having two other guests. We could not have accommodated them. We would have had to put them up in a hotel, and we, to be honest, didn't really have too much money to do that. Fortunately, we saw that a number of our Fulbright friends who had no Hungarian connection and therefore did not have a fear of maybe having being detained in Hungary because of the country of their birth, had been to Hungary, they loved the experience, and said, "Oh, you just have to go." So we inquired at the American embassy, and they gave us the answer that if the Hungarian embassy in Vienna granted us an entry-exit visa, then there is a relatively good chance that there will be no major problem with us going there. Now, we also had to think of finances. Whatever money we had for travel was money that Eva had earned from June to quitting time in December, and we wanted to get as much bang out of those bucks as possible. At first, we were even thinking of maybe going to the Innsbruck Olympics, which were held in February of '64 there in Austria, but that would have been a very expensive proposition. So instead, we were trying to arrange our finances in such a way that we would get maximum use of that saved money. Note that the Fulbright scholarship that I had was sufficient for the maintenance of our life. Basically, we divided the monthly stipend in the following fashion. 1/3 went to rent, 1/3 was for food and laundry, and the final 1/3 was for basically entertainment and theater tickets and opera and transportation and stuff like that. I must confess one little sin here. Each month we had to go to the Austrian office of the Fulbright Committee, which was very close to the American Embassy, to pick up our stipend, which was then paid to us in cash. And since the American Embassy was so close, and the American Embassy also had a nice library, very often we just stopped in there. But even before Eva arrived, I made a habit of going there, and this is silly, but I went to the toilet there and always came away with a roll of toilet paper, which I swiped from the public toilet, simply because the Austrian toilet paper in 1963-64 was atrocious. It was almost like using sandpaper on your derriere, and the nice, soft American toilet paper was so much more inviting. Anyway, I have confessed this to very few people. Now you know that I was a toilet paper thief. We took 2 trips to Hungary during our stay in Vienna. The first one came in the 3rd week of April, and we got a visa to enter and took a train to Budapest. Now the train came to a stop at the border station called Hegyeshalom, where you could really see and feel what the Iron Curtain was all about. As the train pulled into this border station, if you looked out the window, there were these towers with machine guns. The train itself was surrounded with men with Tommy guns, and it certainly gave a threatening kind of feeling with these damn big red stars everywhere. Shortly after the train began moving toward Budapest, passport control came, and they took our passports, and the border agent then disappeared with our documents. And I must say, it was a very, very unpleasant feeling. It was almost like being naked, since the American passport does give a certain sense of protection. We were at the outskirts of Budapest when the official came and handed us our passports back. When we pulled into the railroad station in Budapest and got off the train, Eva's grandmother and aunt were there to greet us, as well as my cousins Lockett and Iluka. These are the son and daughter of my mother's older sister. And my grandmother, feeling too frail to come out on public transportation, decided that she will await me at home. So at this point we parted. Eva and her family then went back to Eva's grandmother's apartment, and I, accompanied by my cousins, was taken to see my grandmother. It was an absolutely wonderful and emotional reconnection. I had not seen my grandmother for almost 21 years. I was now a 26-year-old person, and I last saw her when I was 5. Yet, what is so remarkable, as we sat there and talked, it seemed like I had not arrived from the other part of the world after 21 years, but I had just arrived simply from Vienna after not seeing her for maybe a month or so. We immediately reconnected, and my grandmother was one of those incredibly wonderful people who, when you were with her, you had the feeling that you were the most important person in the world at that point for her. So we had an absolutely wonderful time together. In the evening, I made my way back to Eva's grandmother's place and met them, and was very, very happy to have the chance to meet Eva's relatives, who were so sweet and kind, and who put us up for the 8 days that we stayed in Budapest. We had arrived on Saturday. Sunday, all of us, the two grandmothers, all kinds of aunts and cousins that could be gathered at this point, we all met at the Coronation Church up on Buddha Hill, Castle Hill, in the for Mass. The church itself had sustained considerable damage during the long siege of Budapest, and outside had been already fixed up and reconstructed. Inside, however, still showed many of the scars of the fighting and the bombs and rockets that had hit the church. It was a beautiful church service, at the end of which they sang the Hungarian national anthem. There was not a dry eye in the church. I myself cried like a baby. Subsequently, we all went to a nearby restaurant, which today is so touristy that even a few years ago, at my professorial income, I could have ill afforded. In those days, I took about 5 or 6 relatives with me, and we had a wonderful lunch there. For the rest of the week, we met every aunt, uncle, cousin, first cousin, second cousin that you can imagine. It was absolutely wonderful to reattach. This is true of both my family as well as Eva's family. Again, there are things that you have to keep in mind. Budapest in 1964 was a city very much unlike today, that was dark and dingy. The signs of recent war, Second World War, and the unsuccessful revolution of 1956 were still visible on the buildings. They were still buildings that had not been reconstructed since their destruction in World War II. People were visibly poor, visibly always in a hurry. The public transportation was greatly overburdened. Everybody was running around and looking actually looking miserable. Yet the people that we met, relatives and friends, welcomed us with tremendous amount of kindness and sweetness, and so it was in many ways an eye-opener to see what communism is really like, living behind the curtain is really like, yet at the same time to feel the warmth, the interconnectedness that we had with those who were our flesh and blood. Just as an interesting sidelight, second day that we were there, actually on Monday, we had to report to the national police station, which kept records on foreigners in the country. This was an office where everybody was very cold and very officious, and although they did not show any outward hostility, there was certainly no friendliness either. Subsequent to going there, Eva and her grandmother and aunt and I went out to Margaret Island in the middle of the Danube to look around and see some of the sights there. By the time that we got back to Eva's grandmother's apartment, the concierge had already been contacted by the police. They were there to make sure that we, in fact, were in that house. That's how closely they monitored everything. Now, for me, the stay in Budapest was not simply to see relatives or to be a tourist. It also had some important scholarly aspect. First of all, I made two fairly long visits to the Hungarian National Archives, looking for material on my dissertation, and really lucked out because I did find two until then unknown documents which came in very handy when I was writing my dissertation 2 years later. The second wonderful aspect of all this was the fact that I was able to go to antique bookshops in Budapest, and in those days books in Hungary were incredibly inexpensive, and so I was able to pick up a number of older books with material that was relevant to my topic of dissertation, and also some newer publications. And armed with these, we then headed back to Vienna. The last Sunday that we were in Budapest was sort of the last hurrah. We were able to treat 11 relatives at a little restaurant on the Buda side of the Danube, and then said our goodbyes to them. Monday, the last day of our stay, we made sure that we would be able to only see the grandmothers to whom we paid special attention, and obviously not knowing if when we would be able to see them again, we wanted to spend quality time with them. And then we got on the train and headed back to Vienna. Already on the train back to Vienna, Eva and I were talking about how wonderful this experience was, and that we definitely wanted to be able to come back at least one more time to see at least the grandmothers. And so we left Budapest exhausted, yet in many ways uplifted. The crossing at the border was very simple. The customs people did not even open any of our luggage and just waved us through. And when we got back to Vienna, we took a taxi back to our little apartment. When the taxi driver lifted the suitcase that we were carrying back to Vienna, he said, "Sir, do you have paving stones in here?" Why? Because I had so many books stuck in that suitcase that it was almost impossible to budget. Anyway, the second trip to Vienna took place in the toward the end of June, just before our departure back to the United States. That time, our trip was under the auspices of the Austrian Travel Bureau, and we took a bus from Vienna to Budapest, and at that time the package that we had included 2-day stay at the Hotel Béke, which in the olden days before the war was called Britannia, and today, after much rebuilding and updating, it is the Budapest Radisson Hotel. It was in those days a typically run-down socialist hotel, but we really didn't mind. That was not the main reason why we were there. It was simply to go and be with the grandmothers. During the second trip, we were able to tell the grandmothers that they will become great grandmothers in early 1965 because Eva was expecting. As you can imagine, the joy of these dear old ladies was immense. We again said our goodbyes, and we promised that as soon as we are financially able to do so, we will return to Budapest and show off the baby that we were expecting. As a footnote to all of this, while traveling in Germany in May, Eva began to feel tired and quote-unquote unwell, and there were also other signs that she might be expecting. Once back in Vienna, she went to see a gynecologist who reinforced her suspicions. My recollection of this event is something that I will always remember. I was off at the University Archives like I usually spend my time, and upon coming home, again, as always, Eva was by the door and greeted me with great warmth and a big kiss. This time the kiss was more intense, and then she looked up and said, "Welcome home, father of our baby." You can imagine the absolute joy that had overtaken both of us. Now, we were not only a couple, we were to be a family. Immediately upon hearing this wonderful news, we wrote to our parents, telling them the good news of the impending birth of a grandchild. My mother, brother and sister, wrote back enthusiastically how wonderful it is and how very, very happy they are that there is a little one on the way. As far as Eva's parents are concerned, the situation was somewhat different. A week passed, the second week passed, the third week passed, and absolutely no response to this joyous news. But then when the response did come, it was rather negative. They said that they were appalled at our irresponsibility, that here we had not shown good judgment and having Eva become pregnant, and that this does not show very good judgment. Well, the fact that maybe we were somewhat irresponsible is close to the truth, or at least it seemed like that. As I mentioned in my previous presentation, my previous story, I had sought employment while back home previous Christmas, and had gone to Philadelphia to the convention, and I felt that I had a very good interview with the University of Vermont. And sure enough, shortly after our arrival back with Eva in Vienna, a letter came in which the department head at Vermont indicated that they would like to hire me. They quoted our salary, they quoted the type of courses I was going to be teaching, and they asked for my response. Whereupon I wrote back and indicated that the salary and the course load seems appropriate, and that I am looking forward to joining the Vermont faculty in the fall. Subsequently, we didn't hear anything, and then I wrote again saying that we have not heard anything, and I would like to know who do I contact about the books that I will be using next fall. Please indicate an answer to my queries. Whereupon I received a handwritten lead pencil written note, which said something to the effect, "Dear Mr. Domonkos, we are very sorry, there is a misunderstanding, but we have hired somebody else for the position that we were considering you for. We do, however, wish you the very best in finding a job for yourself for next fall." I can imagine how that felt. The letter from Vermont and Eva's announcement of her pregnancy came within days of each other. We immediately sat down and wrote as many letters as I could to as many people in the academic world as possible, asking them for help to find a job for me, since here I am in the middle of Europe and I do not have a job. Fortunately, eventually this will be resolved, and so the irresponsible behavior maybe was not as irresponsible as my in-laws thought. But the fact is that maybe we were a little too eager in starting a family, and in subsequent years we have talked about this and said that we were so delighted that we had the children that we had. But maybe if we would have waited 1 year longer and would have gotten our financial foothold on a little more stable ground, it would have been a smarter move. But let's face it, you cannot change things, and as things turned out, everything is absolutely perfect, and I wouldn't change anything because happiness is what is important, and that's what we got. In May, Ava and I took a trip to Germany. We got one of those U-Rail passes. You could only buy them in the United States, which allowed you to travel throughout Europe and first class. And so making use of this U-Rail pass and making good use of it, we usually got on a train late at night, so we would then travel during the night in one of the nice first class compartments, and would wake up in the morning at one of the railroad stations, would go and wash up and put our belongings into one of the steel cabinets found at these places, where for a few cents you were able to lock them up, and we would go and see the town, and then retrieve our bags and move on. This is how we went to Cologne, and then from there, after beautiful half a day in Cologne, seeing all the fantastic sights with the cathedral now fully rebuilt and as gorgeous as ever. We went back to Düsseldorf, which we last saw as a bombed out city, now a beautifully rebuilt town. We then went to the nearby town where we had, with Ava, been at the bowling alley as sort of a mass refuge for several families. We found a bowling alley. It was now in use, not as a refugee camp, but as a bowling alley. We were also able to find a nice little bed and breakfast and stayed there. The following day, I went to see the school, the German school where I had attended, and then we spent a wonderful few hours with Mrs. Kreutzer. She was the lovely lady who, during the time that we lived in their house as refugees, they had made provisions for me to have at least one of my meals with them, because I was such a scroungy kid at that time. Now obviously no longer scroungy. She remembered me very, very fondly, was so delighted to see me married to such a beautiful woman. Her own two then teenage daughters, then meaning in 1946 to 48, were now married women with children. So it was an absolutely wonderful reconnection. After several days of travel in Germany, we went back to Vienna. After all, occasionally I did have to show up at the university, and that I did not want to miss. And then, since poor Ava felt weak and had morning sickness, we decided that I would go to Germany once more alone, and I did. I made a large loop around the West German countryside, saw the city of Mainz, Worms, Würzburg, Bamberg, went back to the Lahn Valley, to Dietz and Limburg, where I had attended French school, found the building. It was now a spa, and also visited the town of Passau, where we had survived the end of World War II. And then exhausted, but full of wonderful experiences, I returned to Vienna. I must say it was nice to be able to see all this, but it would have been even nicer could Eva have been along with me. Finally, we also took a trip to Italy. First took the train from Vienna to Venice, spent a wonderful 2 days there, then went to Florence. Again, found a great place to stay, went around all of the major sites. I went to the Uffizi Museum, and here it's just a short footnote. After we came home, I was telling my mother how wonderful the Uffizi art gallery was, but I said, you know, there's one picture there by a painter called Del Sarto, and that's the one that I always loved the most. And I said, we stood there looking at it, and Mom smiled and she said, you know, this is uncanny, because when your father and I were on our honeymoon and went to the Uffizi Gallery, we also stood by that very same painting and stood there admiring it and thinking that it is one of the most lovely portraits of the Virgin and the saints produced during the Renaissance period. I wonder whether my liking for that picture had something to do with the fact that I guess by the time my mother and father saw this picture, I had already been conceived, but that is really stretching the point. Well, by the time we got to Rome, Eva was suffering from heat and from weakness and morning sickness. But fortunately, we were able to solve that problem since my cousin Clara Graf Coitzi and her family were in Rome at that time. Her husband, Willy, architect, was on assignment away from Rome, but he worked for an architectural firm that was based in the city. So I took Eva over to Coitzi's house. There she sought refuge on the couch with cold compresses on her forehead, while I went and I saw everything that you can imagine in covering in one day, all of the major monuments, Arches of Triumph and the Colosseum and the Forum and the Vatican Museum and the Vatican Library and the Sistine Chapel. I did on foot or on public transportation, walking until I practically walked my shoes into bare soles. Returned late at night to the Graf residence, went back to our little bread and breakfast. Next day, Coitzi was sweet enough to take us around by car, so Eva was able to see many of the sites herself, and we even went out to a little lake where there was a castle called Odescalchi Castle, and a few years ago while watching TV, I recognized that castle because it was in the news. Tom Cruise and his wife were married at that very same place. Uh, we then took the train back to Austria, made our quick visit to Hungary that I described, and then packed up our belongings. Our trunks were shipped from Vienna to Genoa to be put on the ship that we were going to be sailing on. We said goodbye to all our dear friends in Vienna, particularly Dr. Gall, who had been so helpful in my research. We boarded the train and went to Venice, had 6 minutes to catch the train to Milan, stayed there for a day, saw the sights, and then went to the city of Genoa, where on the pier was the boat called the Atlantic, and we boarded that. Our trunks that had been shipped from Vienna also caught up with us. They were put on board as well, and following exactly the same route that I did in the previous September alone, now we followed on our way back to New York. The only difference is that instead of Casablanca, we stopped at Palma, Mallorca. We arrived in New York Harbor on Monday, July 14th. My dear brother, bless his kindness, was there with our car and ready to pick us up. And after driving all night and arriving in Sharon at 4:30 in the morning, we quickly hit the sack, and at 8 o'clock I was standing before a class in Western civilization, ready to lecture. Obviously, I did dismiss my students a little earlier, but my summer teaching had begun. I was one day late and continued to teach until the end of August. I will continue this story roughly from this point, and in fact go back and hit a few more points before closing. And so until next